But hi, everybody. Welcome to the Data Science Hangout. If we haven't met before, I'm Rachel Dempsey. I'm the host of our Hangout here, and I lead customer marketing at Posit. This is our open space to chat about data science leadership, questions you're facing, and getting to hear about what's going on in the world of data across different industries. So we're here every Thursday at the same time, same place. So if you are watching this on YouTube at some point in the future and you want to join us live, there'll be a link in the details below where you can add it to your calendar. At the Hangouts, we're all dedicated to making this a welcoming environment for everybody. So we love to hear from everyone, no matter your years of experience, your titles, your industry, or the languages that you work in too. It's totally okay to just listen in here as well. I know sometimes people will be out for a walk, maybe you're on your lunch break or it's later in your day. And there's always three ways, though, that you could jump in and ask questions or provide your own perspective. So one, you could jump in by raising your hand here on Zoom, and I'll be on the lookout. Two, you could put questions into the Zoom chat. And if it's something you wanted me to read instead, just put a little star next to it. And then three, we also have a Slido link, which I'm sure Curtis or someone from the team will share in just a second here, where you can ask questions anonymously too. But with all that, thank you for spending your Thursday with us. I'm so excited to introduce my colleague and co-host for today, Julia Silge. Julia is a software engineer here at Posit. And Julia, I'd love to have you introduce yourself and share a little bit about your role, maybe something you like to do outside of work too.
Great. Hello everyone. I'm so glad to be here. My name is Julia, and I have worked at Posit for going on 4 years now. And when I was first hired and so I work on one of the open source teams who focuses on open source software and mostly R. When I first came to then our studio, I was on the Tidy Models team, and I was on the Tidy Models team for 2.5-ish years, something like that. And it was a really exciting time to work on the Tidy Models team because it was just kind of getting to a point where it really was mature enough to be used for people's real machine learning and modeling workflow. So that was really exciting. From when I was hired originally, one of the things that was kind of on the table for like something I would work with would be to work on the really applied and practical problems of deployment of what you need to do with a model after you have trained it. And so after being at on the Tidy Models team for about a year, I kind of started digging into that, and then maybe about a year after that, I transitioned to really working on that full-ish time, like most of my emphasis going to those kinds of deployment kinds of things. So if you've and we also hired someone from the beginning, the plan was that was always to make that something that worked for R and Python, because the technologies that people use to deploy models are really not very specific to what language you use to train them in. And so we really saw this as an opportunity to help people have choices and have a unified approach at the end. So that the MLOps kind of project is one that is bilingual. That is R and Python. So we do just that, do both that. So if you have ever used something like pins, me and my team work on that for R and Python. The particular package that is focused on model deployment is Vetiver, and then there are other kind of like handful of things that are a little lower level that are kind of behind some of these things that we take responsibility for and maintain. So like most of the people who work on open source software, I do a mix of writing actual code and then writing documentation and making materials so that people can know how to use our tools. So that's a little bit about me and what I do here and the kind of things that I focus on.
Awesome. And what about something you like to do outside of work too?
Yes. So I would say that I don't have something like really exciting for this list. It's like reading books, watching TV shows, doing things with my family, like nothing really unusual or out of the ordinary. I uh I am like, I almost pains me to admit this, but like since the sort of disintegration of Twitter, I have read twice as many books this year as I did last year.
That's
Oh,
great. Yeah.
it's good, but I always maintained, like, I was like, oh no, it doesn't affect me. It's not taking up that much of my time, but I literally have read twice as many books this year as I did last year. And I read a couple just now that were very sort of spooky Halloween
Mhm.
appropriate. One is like a really sort of warm, sweet ghost romance. It's called The Dead Romantics. Lovely. And then one is like a sort of uh like a kind of gothy sci-fi kind of thing. It's called Gideon the Ninth, and it was also a delight, although more gory.
I
Not too much. I can't handle a lot, but like a little more grim
I love that we can
in a
bring a
funny
little
way.
like Halloween theme into
Yeah,
this week
yeah, yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah. It's fantastic.
I saw Morris had a great call out to your YouTube channel as well, and I thought it might be nice to just ask a little bit about that first. Like, what led you to start creating some of those videos, and can you tell us a little bit about them?
Sure, sure. So I think I started at first as like an experiment. So I've done blogging for a long time. And like my initial sort of like motivation for blogging was that I was actually transitioning into data science as a career. This is maybe like 10-ish, 8-ish years ago, and I was trying to make a career transition. Before, my academic background is like physics and astronomy, and I'd been doing I was in research for a long time. Then I did work like at an ed tech startup and like an ed tech kind of company, and I was like transitioning into data science. And I thought, okay, I have this weird kind of background. I don't like how are people going to know that I can do this job at all? And so blogging was part of me kind of trying to have this idea of like a portfolio to be able to for my own sort of career growth kind of thing. But it really led to so much that was good in my life and career. And when I came here to work at then our studio, Tidy Models was really at a point where like a thing to deal with is like, how do we show people how to use this? How do we demonstrate it? So I did it kind of as an experiment to be like, is this something that would be helpful to people? I honestly like, it's interesting. I'm like, I would always rather read something than watch a video about something. Like personally, like I'm like, oh my gosh, just let me read it. Why is everything a video? I'm like in my mid 40s, so you know. But at the same time, there were times when I would like watch videos and I was like, "Oh, I didn't know you could do that." Or like, "Oh, I never saw someone do that like in the way they actually were writing code or the way they use their IDE or something like that." And so I'm kind of like, I kind of see the benefits of both video and for communication and teaching and all that, and written is certainly my first choice. And so you'll notice like all my screencasts, like I pop up a quick blog post. Like I don't put a ton of energy into it, but I always like there's always a place you can go to see it. I also do that partly because I have had people talk to me about the accessibility issues around video for communication. And if you have something that is text, you know, that's HTML, like on a website, like that's much more accessible to people who need to use screen readers or, you know, like have like, so I always try to do both. I always try to do both.
Yeah.
But so at the beginning, I was like, let's do an experiment. Let's see. And I think it really helped people see tidy models as something that was like, oh, I can try that. Let me do that. Let me do that. And so that would be kind of what went into the start of it. And then Certainly as I've moved, depending on the balance of my time in every given month, I don't always, like my sort of goal is to like do 2 a month, but I don't always hit 2 a month.
I really like having both the video and blog format too, because if you get stuck in either one, you
Hmm.
go to the other and kind of unblocks you.
Yeah.
But I see, Ben, you had a question in the Zoom chat. Do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, yeah. Hey, Julia. Curious, you've obviously been on long-term to value projects, longer term, so you're not able to see the benchmark is just really high. And I have a couple that I'm working on as well, for an internal solution. And it's hard to maintain the excitement, also to create that vision for the end goal, and also to vet it out. So I have like 5 different questions built into
Oh,
this.
okay. Okay. Let's see if I can remember them all. Let's do them one at a time.
So the idea is, the main one is, how do you maintain excitement and enthusiasm, but also maintain a clear scope over a long term to value project, especially like.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a great question. I think that the number one thing is to I know you all have seen these kind of pictures, but like you can think about like waterfall versus like MVP, right? And you've seen those pictures of like making a bike or something. And it's like, what do you make first? Do you make a wheel? And you're like, I made a wheel. Here, it's ready. And then you make the seat. Here's a seat. Or do you like, is the first thing that you make like a really simple skateboardy thing that like someone can use to get somewhere, and then you change and change. So I think it is so important to make to build in such a way that at any given point there's something that you can show and um uh, and say like, here is the idea of what it's going to be, and I'm going to improve it in this way and this way, and then improve it in ways. And it is true that sometimes this means it can take longer to get to the eventual thing, like the perfect bike kind of thing that you have. But it is, I think, so important for buy-in from stakeholders, and it's so important for people seeing you as someone who ships and um, who gets things done, and it provides something useful, that you get something useful as early as possible, even if it is not the eventual way you're going to do it. Like I think adopting that kind of mindset, it makes a huge difference in how collaborative people think you are and how responsive people think you are. Your organization, how your position with an organization, if you can break things down, if you I mean, there's tons of books and blog posts about this. I'm not saying anything crazy or new, but even for something statistical, can I give someone something that is dead simple now, and then can I iterate, right? Like if you were talking about a machine learning context, it's like, can I do something that I almost even didn't have to train, or that doesn't use machine learning, right? Like as an initial kind of like, here, it's going to look like this. It's going to be this API. And right now what's serving it is something like so dumb, like so simple. And then you do a model that you can train in literally 10 minutes, right? And then you do that, and then you try to improve it rather than to get to something great. I think that does have to be balanced, right, with how much time, just time it takes to do projects, right? But I think within the scope of whatever kind of project you're doing, if you can really think about not trying to build it up in pieces, so that the individual pieces, like that they're as useful as early as possible, even if that means you build it simpler. So I think that is important, and that really helps the teams I've been on in that like maintaining motivation, because if people are actually using even the very early versions of what you're doing, you get feedback on it, you learn earlier what people are actually looking for, and that kind of like, versus that sort of a very sort of siloed feeling of like, well, I'm just going to grind away for a very long time on this big project, but instead of that feeling like, what about this? What about this? Like getting feedback and I think for teams I have worked on has been very motivating, very motivating.
Can I ask that next one, Rachel?
Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
The
I love that explanation too, though, Julia.
So the ideas that come about, obviously you're not limiting yourself to just like 2 ideas that you've had over the last 6 or 7 years. So how do you vet the ideas that you're coming up with and that you're seeing with yourself and also with your team to make sure that they're valid and they're worth creating a vision around?
That's a great question. So you're asking if okay, yeah. So I am also a pretty big fan of like small experiments, like small experiments and hypotheses. And this is like related to the thing that we were just talking about deciding, like getting to something show like demo level, getting to something there's these like minimal viable project, like these are the kind of words, getting to something as early as possible, like literally sometimes time boxing something to one afternoon, 1 hour even, right? Like what can I get in 1 hour, and can I show this to someone and get feedback on it and see what resonates about it and what doesn't. um I would think is like one of the biggest sort of tools I've used to evaluate ideas or evaluate hypotheses. Like if we try something, is it like does it resonate? Does someone want to see more? Does someone want to have changes they want to suggest it, or are people kind of like, I don't know. I am really biased towards like ship early and experiment and don't have, and it does mean that like like for me it's like I have to have an attitude of like holding these things with a very light hand, that I'm like, I'm not super invested in this or this, like I just want to know, like what do you think, like that type of thing. So on the positive like example of this, that is how Vetiver happened actually. So I think I was like, it's like MLOps as a tool feels so, or as a field or idea feels like so big, a little hype driven, and like what, like, oh, we can't, like we say, we as Posit, it's like, can we play in that space? Is that reasonable for us? There are whole startups that's nothing what they do. And like I had a hypothesis. I was like, I think the pieces are here in open source, and people are already like kind of bailing wire these things together themselves if they're not like buying into like a startup product-y kind of MLOps thing. What if we made like an open source thing that really used components, pieces that are already there? And so the initial version that I like showed someone was like, I think we have most of what we need, and we just need to make like the user experience nice for this particular model-based use case. And so that was like the initial sort of, I did actually make the initial sort of thing I made was actually much more shiny like, and ended up being like, oh, in terms of like what it looked like a server, like all this kind of thing. And I ended up there ended up being a fairly big shift of like, oh, okay, no, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to instead do like code generation, a fair amount of code generation behind the scene kind of. So I kind of shifted, but there were things about the initial version I showed people that resonated. They're like, okay, they want to do X. And then there were things about it they were like, I don't know, like that's not making sense to me, or like that seems too complicated. Like I think I should be simpler. And so there were things that about it that helped me iterate towards something. And then we kind of like iterate and like keep going forward and like land on something that hopefully fits pretty well. So I think that I probably lean less, I would say, on my own opinions or taste. I'm like, I am sure this is right. And I tend to lean more on, let me like show things to people, let me do even user interviews, like let me like use some of those tools to figure out how things need to happen.
Yeah. I see there's a little conversation in the chat happening about this too, and we can definitely jump on to other topics too, but I wanted to make sure while that conversation's happening, we dive into. George, do you want to add your follow-on question?
Yeah. I guess I've had the experience where people really don't want to see those intermediate steps,
Mm.
just want that final thing. Especially to your point about like, even in cases where it's a statistical, model or something that you're needing to deliver, sometimes delivering a simple thing is good enough. I've had the experience where it's just not, and I think it's because of perception of like stability or, maybe just the culture, the culture of
Yeah.
that. And so I don't know if you've ever come across that, but it's like it's basically like you have to sell the whole thing or else it dies. And I don't know if you've ever had that experience and how you've overcome that.
Yeah. So this experience where someone doesn't view it as important to give feedback on an intermediate thing, or to look at an intermediate thing, or to start integrating something that is less complete or less mature or less finished um, into maybe the system that you're going for. So if it is really something that you're like, I need feedback on these intermediate steps in order to get where I need to go. Um, it it can be helpful to explain why, like explain why we want to um build things in a with an iterative improvement. If you're talking to a software engineer colleague, they probably resonate with this idea, right? Because it's so common in software engineering, this idea of like, we do something small, then we improve it. Like we don't do something huge and massive all at once, right? Like we know that's more prone to errors, it's more prone to not getting where you want to be, all that. So I have had luck with software engineer colleagues in explaining, this is like what you do, but for data work, so I need you to um I need to us to take these steps so that we end up in a better place in the long run. I think that it may be interesting, George, to like if you're having this kind of problem more with, say, like a business stakeholder, like less with an engineering kind of stakeholder in your data work, and more like a business stakeholder. And I have had more challenges in those situations in trying to and trying to uh, get those kinds of answers. So sometimes I have been in a situation where I just share, and partly and as a like, here's where it is, and the next steps are X. Next week, here's where it is, next steps are Y. If I do need feedback, if I do need like, I need something back the other direction, um, it can be more challenging with business stakeholders to understand that. But when I have had success with that kind of overcoming that kind of obstacle, it has been through a fairly specific request, or like a fairly specific like um I have a prototype of the statistical results. It's not its final version, but I need to ask you these questions about it. And if like either set a meeting, or if it's async, like a question A, question B, question C. And then to like, when I've had success, it's been they like, I really clearly understand why I need something. It's like, the goal is this. to get to the goal, I need to know which of these things do. But that can be a more, because there's less of a culture, I think. Like in with engineers, there's more of a norm and expected culture around like we do things iteratively to get a better result. But I have had more, it has been more challenging there. And then I think connecting it to like what is the goal and saying like this is what I need has been how I have had success in that. But I have sometimes been in a situation where I just feel like, am I just putting this out into the void, you know?
It's an interesting thought to think about how we get other people to think iteratively as well. But Husada, I see you had a question a bit earlier about tidy models. Do you want to jump in? And I can read the question. And if you want to jump in and add more context, feel free. But the question was, how are the state of tidy models adaptations? Are there enough adopters or users to please the tidy models team's metric or target? Are there targets?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that it is so when I have been while I've worked on open source projects, adoption, right, like is something that we that like open source teams watch, that open source teams pay attention to and decide, you know, like, well, it's like one piece of data we have to decide how to invest and what to invest in. Like if, you know, if there are like two things we can invest in or projects we invest in, how do we prioritize them? One of the things that goes into is things like adoption. It's not the only thing because sometimes that's not the only reason to invest in something. Like I talk about this all the time, but you probably are familiar with the idea of like the data science hierarchy of needs. Monica Rogati wrote about this like 2017 or 16 or something, and at the bottom is like you're collecting data at all, and then one up is you're doing analytics, things like dashboards. One like a level up from that is like is like statistical analysis, like maybe things like a t-test or maybe something like a linear model, and up above that you're using machine learning, and at the top is like AI, you know, kind of thing. And you can think about that also in terms of where does model deployment go on that? Like it's up pretty high. Like people have to be using have to be having models. They need to have models that are deployed. Like it's up pretty high in that hierarchy of needs. So that affects adoption numbers, right? Like something like tidy models is never going to have the adoption numbers of something like Shiny because they're at like different places in the data science hierarchy of needs. But at the same time, like if you're thinking about what should we invest in, you want to make sure that when people look at tooling or a language or a company's products or something, that when people look at it, they can see that it can grow with them. They can see that like this is not a tool that like maxes out. Or if you do decide to do that, you need to do it very carefully, right? Like when people look at this tool, they're going to understand its scope is limited and they can't use it beyond X level, you know, of scale or maturity or whatever. So there's different reasons. I would say that in terms of adoption, that when we look at like who wants to come to Conf and learn about something, or like who, if we look at like who, like internally in our customers, like how often are people asking about a tool or wanting like to know more about how to do something, like we feel good about the investment that has been made in tidy models. Certainly, when you think about like if you were to go right now to GitHub and like count up, right, like how many people, like how many things are using tidy models versus something else, right? Which, you know, you might, what would you compare it to? Like, would you compare it to Carrot? Would you compare it to scikit-learn? You know, like probably if you were to compare those numbers, you'd be like, oh, there's more projects that use Carrot because Carrot's been around for like 15 more years or something like that, or scikit-learn many more project for reasons that we understand. But I think that if you ask the question like is Posit happy about the investment that has been made in tidy models? I think it really fits a need, like a need that people have, and so in that sense has been really happy about the investment.
Awesome. Julia, a question I wanted to ask you is, I see a lot of things on LinkedIn that are like, models are rarely deployed, or, oh, teams spend all this time developing something and it doesn't go anywhere. Like, why does that happen?
I think some of the time that's appropriate, like that's normal and okay, because one thing that's different about machine learning as a practice compared to software engineering as a practice is you can pretty much always build something. Like if you write out a spec for something that's like, we need to build X, like as a software engineer, let's write out a spec, let's do it. Like you pretty much always can do that. You know, maybe it will take longer than you think or more investment than you think, but actually that's not true when it comes to machine learning, because until you start the process, you don't necessarily know that you can predict the thing that you need to predict from the stuff that you have. You may end up not having appropriate data. You may end up it is not good enough. Like the results you get are not good enough to predict that you think that you want to. So machine learning as a practice it's more iterative, it's more exploratory. Even, you know, we're not even talking specifically about like exploratory data analysis, but as a practice, it is more exploratory than say, we're going to build a feature. And it is there, you know, you can be less certain ahead of time that the whatever model you're trying to do, you can actually fit, especially within whatever is needed. So I think that it happens because that's a big reason why it happens, is that is the nature of data science, nature of machine learning. There's a really great paper. I'm going to see if I can find it real quick that talks about this. Yes, okay, I found it. It's called Operationalizing Machine Learning, and I'll put the link here. And it talks about this in the context of machine learning, especially, and really just says this is why. Like this is why is because the nature of this work. So that's one big reason. I think another reason is that it often when people are like working on machine learning projects in their org, they're bumping up against the maturity of where they've been before, where their org has been before. And so people's don't have as much of the muscle memory and the skills about how to do these things, how to deploy them. So that's, I think, so the big reason is like, it is the nature of machine learning as work. The next piece is that often when people are doing these things, it's new to their org or newer, they're exercising new skills. And the other thing I think that really contributes to this is you almost always are ending up collaborating across functions. So most typically, like if you're a more statistical person, you are now needing to collaborate with someone who's a more opsy person. And people work in different ways. Teams don't sit together. People end up with, it's like, oh, that will never work. You know, like that will never work because of X. And what can both sides do to actually make something work if it needs to happen? So I think those are like the real reasons why this kind of thing happens.
Yeah, thank you. I see, Patrick, you had asked a question that I think kind of like follows along to this nicely, if you want to jump in here too.
Thanks, Rachel and Julia. Hi, it's good to see you. Yeah, this is very much what you were just talking about, and sort of references back to the data science hierarchy of needs piece too. So I'm just wondering, like, what advice would you give to a team or an organization who's struggling to go from, okay, we have a model and it fits well enough and it's sort of doing what we want it to do, to having a model in production that we're using regularly and that we depend on? That it feels like a very big change to me. psychologically for the team or the organization to go from, yes, we can do this to, yes, we are relying on this thing and it is in production and it's important to us. So what advice do you have for people who are struggling to make that step?
Yeah. So I think one thing is to acknowledge, to understand that you as a team or some part of the team is going to need to gain some new skills, is going to need to learn how to do some new things, and to try to make space and understand that kind of change is coming and is needed. So this is, for example, like maybe it's important for someone on your team to start kind of learning, like, what does our org need? If we were to deploy a model, like what is going to work for our org? So this is now working with maybe people who are DevOpsy, maybe people who sit in IT, so what are the new skills we need to add? So that's one thing, is to acknowledge that if you have been very statistically focused and it's time to deploy a model, how can we make space for some proportion of our team to gain some of those skills? I think also to not be afraid of some of those tools and skills, and to understand that, like, that's how you scale the impact of your work. So for example, like, to learn about Docker, right? Like, to learn about what in your, how do things work in your org? If your org has like a certain cloud platform that you all use, like, to start to not so much be like, okay, yes, well, we're the data people, we work in this environment, but to start to kind of push again, like, to find, how do I then take that next step? Also, I think doing things in as small of way as possible. So, like, you can, if you're going to deploy some kind of a model as as an API, it's like, it doesn't have to, the first time you do it, be the huge scalable, can go to infinity kind of API. Like, you can first do a API at all, and then you show like a software engineer or DevOpsy kind of coworker, like, look, if we serve this in this way, then you can get predictions back in this way, and then have a discussion about, like, how can we start to scale that up. So I think the first thing is to think about the skills that someone needs to gain a little bit. The second thing is to think about infrastructure, and like the tools you use now, how are they different from the tools that are being there? Like, what can you learn about your internal specifics? And then also going back to that, like, iterative, like, do something as small as possible to show and be like, okay, how can we take that next step?
Got it. Thank you very much, Julia. I appreciate that. And thank you for building all the tools that make that stuff possible and easier. And yes, Fear of Docker sounds like a great horror movie.
I know.
I also, I just shared in the chat too, if it's helpful for anyone, especially with this conversation right now. Yesterday, Simon Couch from our team led a demo using tidy models and Posit team. And so it's a nice walkthrough as well. I just put that link in the chat.
That looks so great. I'm really excited Simon was able to do that.
Yeah, it was really fun. There are a lot of people there too, which was great. An anonymous question that came in was, if only there was a good way to share these data science endpoints, do you have any advice on deploying and managing these kinds of outputs?
Yeah. So I think that it is really important to find an easy way to do this in a like be able to have an MVP, to be able to have a demo, and then you can work from there. So for those of you who are customers or trying to make a argument around it, like, that is exactly what Connect does. Like, Connect is a way that you as a data scientist can deploy something with one function, with one button kind of click. Like, it really lets you have like a playground. And then depending on the it really reduces the barrier to that first kind of like, I am serving an API, like here it is. If you are in a situation where that's not reasonable for your org, I think that then you are in a situation where you need to like have a conversation with your organization. It's like, well, since we don't have a tool that does this, then you are asking me to gain some of that skill. Like, are you making space for that? Like, is that what we're going to do? Because if it's not like a product kind of thing, like Connect, that really is built for you as like, you are the one it is built for, right? Like you as a data scientist to be able to deploy an API, publish an app, all these kinds of things. Then you're like, okay, then I need to be able to make, like, then you need, like the org needs to acknowledge that you're asking me to gain some of those skills. And so I think, so Plumber has a pretty nice set of documentation for like how to deploy Plumber APIs. And they have, you know, Docker containers that are ready to go. They have, I think, droplets, like a way to like, you can deploy it in a, shoot, I forget, what's the place that has droplets? I'm blanking. The cloud provider, I can't remember. DigitalOcean. That's right. That's right. So it's like, okay, or do you need to deploy a Plumber API? Here's how you can just take it to DigitalOcean, which does have fairly good documentation ways to get started. So it is harder if you're not able to kind of lean on a product that's made for you, you know, like as a person who uses Python or R and wants to deploy an API, you then are in a situation where your org is asking you to do it yourself, maybe, or to talk about it. So the Plumber, you know, or Fast API, you know, like there's documentation there, like how do you actually get Fast API from running on your computer to running somewhere else? There's a lot of ways to answer that question, and some of them are quite easy and built for you as a data science user persona, and some of them mean you really do have to start going into those more opsy areas. I will say, if you are a person that combines like statistical know-how with like opsy know-how, like that's killer career-wise. So I mean, go for it. If like you're interested and you have a little bit of the space to start gaining those skills like that, that's fantastic. Like that like those are people whose like that set of skills, combo of skills is like super valuable in the market. You know, when you hear about like, oh, data scientists, you know, like, oh, I'm so annoyed. It's like data scientists never ship. Data scientists have terrible software engineering practices, like the coding practices. So if you are someone who's like, no, I can do that. I know how to do that. I can learn. I have learned X. I'm in the process of learning Y. That's wonderful for your career. So that's like a sort of look on the bright side, kind of like silver lining kind of situation. If you know, like if that is true for you.
Thank you. I'm going to jump over to a few questions from a bit earlier. Lisa had asked, well, she's taking the dogs on a walk, so I will read it.
Okay.
Wondering how the team finds time to respond to questions on the Posit community and other message boards. Is that part of the job? I'm so thankful you and others from Posit do it.
Absolutely. We consider it part of our job. So I think that,
Lisa's back. Feel free to jump in and say hi, Lisa.
So I would say for the teams I have been on, we absolutely have considered it part one. I'm just gonna one second. Awesome. Thank you so much. So absolutely, the teams I have been on consider it part of our job. I do think it depends on the maturity of the project that you're working on. So for example, Hadley has told me, like when he was first working on ggplot2, he answered every Stack Overflow question about ggplot2, or at least he looked at it. He made sure that, and because it's really valuable source of feedback, like it's a really valuable source of like, it is actually good for you. But now ggplot2 is very mature, and there's many people who answer questions on Stack Overflow about ggplot2, and so Hadley doesn't do it anymore. So I have set up like RSS feeds for Posit community questions, for Stack Overflow that come to like a place that I check, like I have it going to an RSS feed reader. And so like I literally every time there's a question on Stack Overflow that's tagged tidy models, I look at it. I look at it, every single one of them. And, sometimes someone has beat me to answering it, and that's fine unless they answer it wrong, and so that's totally fine. But I just want to make sure anyone who comes and is having a problem, we know what it is. We know what it is. It's really interesting working on open source software from the perspective of like, how do you decide what to do and what the problems are? Because, lots of you, I think, probably work in a situation where you have data, right? That's why you're hired. There's data that exists, and you use that data to improve some product or to like change something. When you're working on open source software, just by the nature of it, we don't have data about usage. We don't have data about like what most common errors are. So you kind of have to find proxies for that. And I think things like questions on Posit community, questions on Stack Overflow, certainly GitHub issues, like these are the proxies that we have for what problems are people having. And so I think it is absolutely, yes, part of the job of like figuring out what people's problems are. And like I said, this especially applies to early maturity projects it's in fact incredibly valuable data that you can use to decide what it is that you need to do. It definitely you have to have like a certain mindset if you're going into this, because turns out people ask the same question over and over. No, but like the fact is, like, either you need to, if you are finding multiple people are asking the same question over and over, you should fix that. You should fix that, or better document that, or like make it easier for people to like not have to ask that question anymore. But definitely if you're in, that's that part of the job of like, okay, let me go through here, like all the questions and feedback. Let me keep in mind that person is frustrated, that person is having a problem. Even if I think, oh my gosh, I've answered this 5 times, they have not had it answered 5 times. So it's, it's definitely the dynamic there is one to be aware of, I think.
I think it's a good reminder for whatever role you're in. When people keep asking you the same question, it might be, or maybe there's a reason.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Okay. I know this time goes by super quickly, so I'm going to try and rapid fire through a few questions. But Ashley, I see you just asked one in the chat. Want to jump in?
Oh, yes. Sorry. I
there you
wasn't
are.
ready for jumping
Hey,
in, but
no worries.
yes,
Hi.
Julia, love your work. I was wondering, I was looking into your learner tidy models from the learner package, and I've really taken a liking to some of the packages that were created, especially this one, but I know it probably hasn't been updated in 2 years. So I was wondering if you had plans to revisit it.
If you look at who contributed to that, you'll see that a lot of work happened during one summer, and it was because we had an intern who came in and like really worked on that. And I think I am really proud of the work that we did there. And I mean, if you are running into a problem like where something isn't working with current versions, please do report a like a GitHub issue, a bug somewhere, because we want to make sure that continues to work. I think like those interactive learner, kind of things can be so effective. And actually, I remember back to when I started learning R. R was not my first programming language. Like I came from like a lower, like a C background, like a lower. So I had like computational background, but I was like, okay, I want to learn this R thing. Seems pretty cool. The thing that I loved the most was actually Swirl, which has I don't even know if it's still maintained or not, but like this is like 8-10 years ago. And what I loved about it is you were actually in the IDE interactively doing stuff, and learner has that same feel, right? Like that same kind of feel, and is such an effective way, because really like we learn by doing. We learn by like just doing. So it's so effective. So I'm very proud of it. So I would say that on the tidy models team specifically, what has been a focus, I would say, lately is more the Tidy Models website. So if you, for example, like if you go to the Tidy Models website and go over to Learn, you'll see there's quite a lot of stuff there, and so there's been more emphasis on things that are more like content you read versus content that you interact with, partly because the barrier is so low, like, so the tidy models, this tidymodels.org was recently moved over to being a Quarto site. It was originally actually technically a blog down site. It wasn't a blog, but it was technically a blog down site, and now it's a Quarto site. And so that makes the barrier so low to like making a new article. It's so like straightforward to do that. So I would say there are not concrete current plans to add more things to Learn Tidy Models, which is the LearnR thing. But I think it's an interesting question to examine, right? Like, what are the really effective ways for people to learn? The other thing that we have done oh wait, no, never mind. Yes. So yeah, I would say I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't think we have current plans to add more. But I think it's an interesting question.
And quick
Yeah,
question, and I only asked that one because I love the Learner package. I'm actually creating my own little course using Learner to help introduce people to R in my field, industrial organizational psychology. And I actually reached out to some people at Posit, and I was wondering, because right now it still runs only on R Markdown. And I think that it would maybe, I don't know if anyone's looking into moving it into Posit. It seems like it's still not Posit, Quarto.
Quarto, yeah.
Yeah, it seems like it's still being maintained, but I'm not sure if there was any plans, just because there's a couple other people I know that made learner courses, and it's so, it helps to bridge that gap also, and something I encourage new learners to do is to learn in our studio,
Yeah.
which is also why I love Swirl, and that also
Yep.
helps the barrier as well. So that'd be curious.
Yeah. I am not super connected to that team, so I don't have a concrete answer. I don't know. How possible it would be to do that in Quarto, but that's a really interesting idea as well. I mean, it's a great point.
Ashley, I can connect with you on LinkedIn and maybe try and find the right person internally to share that feedback with too.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Javier, I see you had a question a little bit earlier. I'm seeing a lot of love on that question. Do you want to jump in here?
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, Julia, I joined late, but always a fan of your work. So one of the questions I had was, I work with a lot of really talented, kind of diverse data scientists or MLEs, and we're writing internal packages all the time. Some of them, in my opinion, would be incredible if we could open source, but there's a sort of concern that we work with member data, that there's HIPAA and PHI and PII, none of it really making its way to packages, but there is still that concern that somehow there could be leakage or, but in general, I've struggled trying to convince kind of the topmost level folks to allow us to, open source some packages. And I didn't know if you had any recommendations there.
Yeah, that is so interesting. And that is such an interesting question, because people, sometimes leadership in a company, the risk feels too big compared to whatever, they're like, oh, why do you want to do that? So I think sometimes you work at orgs that really value open source, value contributing to open source, so my most immediate place I worked before here was Stack Overflow, and Stack Overflow had an had an ethos of like it's normal to contribute to open source, and because actually and before even data scientists got there, they already had that ethos. Like it's largely like a .NET C# kind of shop, and like some of the most widely used like logging libraries, some of these things were made by Stack Overflow devs, and it was open source. And so they already had kind of this ethos. And so when I showed up and I'm like, oh, we're going to do this and this, and I want to open source this piece. And they're like, yep, sure. So that's a kind of situation where people already have buy-in. But if you work in like healthcare, or you work in finance, or you work in something that has like higher constraints around like data privacy than like a tech company where everything is kind of public anyway. It's like all on the at Stack Overflow, it's like there is user data that you don't want linked, but so much of it is there's a public kind of ethos. It was like different. If you don't work in that, I think the thing to do is to like clearly lay out why they should do it at all. And I think there's like, why should they let you spend time on that? And I think one is that it can, like, depending, and in this market, maybe this is not so compelling, but like for recruiting, like if you are in an org and you're like, maybe we work in like a field that's viewed as a little stuffy or boring, but you're like, no, we can show people that the kind of work we do by having an open source library or two, and you can say like it can be used as a recruiting tool to show people the kind of tools they'll be using with the kind of like way. So there's like recruiting, there is I know pharma has just gone through like a big kind of like, is it like if we all band together and make these tools, we can use them then in our compliance, like how we need to report kinds of things.
That's exactly what I would love to do too.
Yeah.
Like sort of like get all the brains together in the healthcare insurance space for the greater good.
Yeah. So I think like there has to be a compelling case made, and then also like how are you going to make sure what processes are going to be in place so that their reasonable concerns about data privacy are addressed, so I think it's definitely tougher when you are in a an industry that has high compliance standards. But I do think the pharma example is one of like why, like how it can work out to make things better actually overall for everyone. I mean, those people are all like competitors. I'm always so amazed at how they collaborate. It's pretty cool.
Me too. Shout out to R and Pharma.
For real.
That's been happening this week too, the conference. Julia, do you have time for one more question? You have a meeting?
I do. I don't.
Okay. Oh, you can stay and hang out forever?
A little bit,
yeah. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Alan, I realized I had missed a question you asked from a bit earlier. If you're still on, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I am. I got to run also, so I'll
okay.
drop in my question and then I'll listen and then I'll run. Thanks, Julia and everybody. I'm really curious, Julia, if there are conscientious decisions about things that don't fit in tidy models, either because of like statistical weirdness or niche or software engineering complexity. Curious about the kinds of decision making about things that just don't belong and how you sort of put those fences up around the framework.
Yes. So there for sure are. And so here's where I will admit that I actually don't have a super strong statistical background. Like my background is physics and astronomy. I'm not a statistician like a lot of you. I literally have never taken statistics course and through my whole education. So some of this, but absolutely, so I'm fairly self-taught when it comes to these kinds of things. So some of these things that I'm about to say, I would say were not necessarily my call, but were calls that I'm like, makes sense. Yes, totally, we're going to do this. There's a specific example in one of the tidy models package that is called R sample, and it is the package for resampling data. And the there is a let me see if I can find it really quick. There's a certain resampling method that is certainly something you can do, but it actually has pretty bad characteristics. It has pretty bad when it comes to deciding like how it is that you are going to do resampling for a model or something like that. It does not have good characteristics. I think it's leave one out cross validation, and it they're pretty bad. And so we actually do have guardrails set up in some of the other tidy models packages that if you have a leave one out cross validation set, it won't let you tune with it. It won't let you tune with it because it's like pretty much always a bad idea. Another example is like when you're doing machine learning or modeling, often what you'll see let's walk through how to do this, and then we're going to predict using the training set, and then I'm gonna compute some kind of measure, some kind of metric using the training set, and that is almost certainly going to cause that's going to be an overly optimistic result. And so it's actually kind of hard to do that in tidy models. And then we get requests being like, I want the metrics on the training set, but that definitely there are these guardrails, and tidy models was built with many of these guardrails in mind to try to help you to do the right thing and make it hard to do the wrong thing. I think it happens less when it comes to software, we can't do that. That is pretty much we are always willing to try to do something if we think it's a good idea. So I think it happens much more on the statistical side than the actual software side, because with enough creativity and energy, it's pretty much possible to do anything.
Right.
That's a great question, though.
Awesome. Yeah,
the same thing applies in Vetiver. We have there's quite a lot of guardrails in there. Same thing happens even in the tidyverse. It tries to keep you from doing something that we almost certainly is a bad idea.
Awesome. Thank you. Making it hard to do the wrong thing is such a great framework and such a good way to put it. Thank you. This has been great. I got to run. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know we're a little bit over here, but thank you so much, Julia, for joining us today and sharing your experience and everything that you do for the community as well. So nice to see so many of you here today too.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for coming, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Have a great rest of the day, everybody. Bye.